pleased to welcome back to the program Larry Nichols. Larry, how are you today?
Fine, thank you, Jason.
You sound great, Larry, and I know everybody was worried about you. We had that call where you were a little bit exhausted, and then last week, of course, you were busy. So I'm pleased to have you back, and I know that everyone in the Crowdsource community shares that sentiment.
Well, thank you, and to everybody, just know that, Jason, there are going to be days when I'm not going to feel like jumping over the moon. Right. And then I apologize for those days in advance, but we'll get through them. We've got business at hand that must be tended to, and it's called our nation.
That's right. That's right. And of course, everyone is sort of, hanging on as the Senate confirmation hearings are underway for Brett Kavanaugh, which, of course, is President Trump's first pick for the Supreme Court. What do you know and what can you tell us about Mr. Kavanaugh, Larry?
Well, the first thing I know, and I want everyone to get real close to the computer or the radio, however you're listening, because certain ground rules need to be put forth, Jason. Number one, folks, this is supposedly a hearing to determine the worthiness or not of Judge Kavanaugh to be on the Supreme Court. Now, but here's the problem. Half of the people in that hearing right now have already made their mind up that they're going to vote against him in confirmation.
Right.
The other half have made their mind up. They're going to vote for him in the confirmation. And this is without hearing a single word from this gentleman so far. Now, folks, remember what I have told y'all. And every day, Jason, it's going to get closer and closer and closer. The rules are simply this. If you're a liberal, you want the same thing that we, conservatives or independents, we want the same thing, you and I. We want freedom to choose, freedom the way our nation was set up to be. But then there is this group called progressives that originate from a group called the Progressive Council. They don't want us to be liberal. They don't want us to be conservative or independent. They want none of that. What they want is the absolute destruction of our constitutional form of government. They want, Jason, our form of government finished, over.
Right.
And they expect to take it over with a new style of government that they are claiming to be somewhere between socialism, in a good way, if there is such a thing, and communism, in a good way, if there is such a thing.
Right.
But in anticipation of this quest that they're on, they are setting the stage perfectly. Because you see, Jason, where we're at on picking a Supreme Court justice right now, to be honest, the progressives could come out now. They could come out right now with commercials and put them all over television and radio and everywhere else and say, the constitutional representative republic form of government that has so well served the United States of America for over 200 years has finally worn itself out and does not work anymore. And as proof, they give you Judge Kavanaugh. He's the proof.
Why is he the proof?
Why have confirmation hearings? Is anybody so stupid that we're to believe they're there to actually dig into and learn about his record and and his history and to see if he's actually qualified for the task?
Well, it's really just a political fight, isn't it? All these hearings.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Why do you say, Larry, that Kavanaugh would be the proof that they need to show that our republic has failed?
Because of timing. He's hitting at exactly the right time. They need something to happen right before this midterm election.
Right.
Guess what? Kavanaugh fits the time slot.
Huh.
I don't think there's anything magnanimous about him or special about him in any specific way. It's just that he is in the right place at the wrong time for this country. And they're going to use it. They're going to use it. But scarier still, Jason, think about it, buddy. Think about the people you talked to in the course of a week. How many people that you talk to or are around would fall sucker to this?
Well, many. I think a lot of people watch the news, and I think even some people that watch Crowdsource the Truth and other alternative news sources are still susceptible to some of these psychological tricks that are seem to be constantly used. And I think you're right, Larry, about the timing and how everything seems to be some sort of, political scenario, or they try to wind it into some kind of political scenario.
Right.
I don't know if you have an opportunity to read True Pundit, Larry, but there was an article that they've just put out today where they're talking about the Department of Justice. There are whistleblowers within who are saying that Mueller's team illegally threatened Michael Flynn with new indictments and prison for helping GOP candidates. In the article, I was speaking with Michael Moore, who of course is Thomas Paine of True Pundit, just earlier, and he's saying that this whole thing with Flynn, the reason why Mueller keeps delaying his sentencing is because they're concerned that, once Flynn's legal hearing and trial and sentencing is all over, Flynn can come out and speak openly without fear for impacting the outcome of the trial. And the things that he said would be remarkably bad for the Democrats. So everything that's happening right now seems to be a political chess game to wait until this midterm election, where they're trying to create this illusion that a blue wave will occur. I've even received messages from Crowdsource the Truth viewers who are definitely Trump supporters and eager to see the president succeed, who are concerned that the Democrats and the opponents of Trump are making headway. Do you think that's the case right now, Larry?
No and yes. No in reality, and yes in the misdirection strategy. Jason, I had the opportunity about a month and a half ago to look at a poll that was put out by MSNBC and CNN. In conjunction with, and I can't remember who the polling company was, but I had a chance to look at the internals. And I would suggest to everybody in this audience, whenever you see a poll pop up on the internet from MSNBC, CNN, CBS, etc., go and find the internal workings of that poll. Because when you do, you will learn what it's all about. In the particular poll that I saw a month and a half ago, it turns out that, I'm going to make these numbers up because I don't remember the exact ones, but it's close enough. 60% were against Trump, said Trump was blowing it, that he had screwed everything up. 60% of the people. Well, when you looked at the internals of the polls, guess what you found? 60%, it was almost exactly linear, 60% said they were Democrats.
Aha.
So, guys, let me ask you, if you're asking Democrats what they think about Donald Trump, what kind of answer do you think you're going to get?
Right. I think I might
And
have
it-
found that poll, Larry. Was this the one that's talking about Trump statements about the Russia investigation, whether they're true or false?
Yes, I think that was part of it. I don't know if that was the premise of the thing, but I think those were in it. They were
Right.
definitely, there was quite a bit about Russia involved in it, yes.
Well, it's pretty funny how it's
And
worded
now
right here, because it's saying, the question was, it's Trump's statements about Russia investigation. 56% thought they were mostly or completely false. 37% thought they were mostly or completely true. So it's vague, even what
Well,
it's asking.
Right. You just need to always look at the internals. And if you will learn everything you need to know about how years ago, I'll tell you a little quick story. Years
Sure.
ago, there was a guy, professor, in Arkansas at a college. He came to me, I think Dick Morris was with me at the time. He came to me and Dick. His name was Dan Rankino. And Dan Rankino got credited in that day for being the father of the modern poll, modern day polling. And we thought we had discovered a shortcut to the moon, because we could take his polling information and find out where the people in Arkansas were at any moment in time on any issue, Jason. I mean, that was incredible information back in that day, 30 years ago. Well, everything was just flowing greatly. We get a call from Rankino. He calls me, he says, we got to meet. I said, what's the matter? He said, well, I need to meet with you and the governor. I said, well, what's it about? He said, well, I'll tell you when I get that on talk over the phone. So I said, fine. Set up a meeting. We meet in the governor's office at the Capitol. And Rankino comes in, just nearly tears in his eyes. And he said, gentlemen, I made a mistake. What I have learned is that my polling techniques not only tell us where the public stands in any particular moment, but it's able to affect public opinion at any moment. So as he did more and more polls, Jason, he found out people would see the poll. Well, if Bill Clinton looked like he was winning by 90 points, right?
Right.
Well, people immediately just joined in and voted for Clinton because they didn't want to feel like an idiot.
Voting for the
and waste
loser.
their vote.
Right.
That's right. Well, oh heavens, you would have thought he shot the Pope. He was so brokenhearted. His head was in his lap. He was just so crushed. And I'm telling you, Bill and I were looking at each other like, are you kidding me? We found the gold mine.
Right.
And we told him whatever he did, he had to keep his mouth shut about that. He said, well, I mean, well, sure, but and he didn't understand what was going on. But that day we learned, that we could take polling and affect the outcome of elections and be more effective doing that than using polling to find out where the public stood. We can make the public do what we wanted.
Wow. Well, this seems
Yeah.
pretty obvious once you lay it out. It's one of those things that perhaps wasn't clear at first, but I just found this article, Larry, which is from 2016, talking about how political opinion polls affect voter behavior, and it's talking about the bandwagon effect. Obviously, most people are not, generally speaking, leaders. They prefer the comfort of knowing that they're following a group. It reassures them in their beliefs. There are certain sort of obvious things about that statement once it's made, but I think we see this going on in many ways, Larry. We see people trying to affect public opinion in the social media sphere by controlling large numbers of fake accounts, trolling President Trump, trolling Crowdsource the Truth. I even get people contacting me about you, Larry. Frankly, any guest I have on, people try to, push their opinions. And when I sort of push back and try to ask them questions or get on the phone with them to verify if this is in fact a real person, that's where you start to see, you got to call it, I remember someone once called it poking the scenery. It looks good from a distance, but when you walk up to it and touch it, it falls over because it's a flat house.
Right. Look, Jason, with you and everybody, I've said this since day one. I don't ask anybody to believe in me. I'm not the Pope. I'm the biggest scumbag that ever walked the face of the earth. I did it. My God, I was with the Clintons for 10 years. You want me to claim I'm holier than thou?
Well, we got to follow up on that story of the jailhouse castration, but that's perhaps for another time.
It's another time. That one is true, but that's the end of that one. But look, we got so proficient at using the polling. I was in a meeting with David Watkins. David Watkins was the chief of staff for Bill Clinton when he was president until I caught him using Helicopter One to go play golf and got him fired. But Watkins set up a polling company called, I think it was Deep South Surveying or Polling, something like that. It was his company. We were in a meeting one day, and we were trying to figure, well, we got to figure out how many people we need to call, et cetera, this, that, and the other. And finally, we were in the meeting, and I said, guys, I got a question. They said, what's that? I said, why aren't we calling anybody? They said, what do you mean? I said, why aren't we calling anybody? Because whatever anybody says to us, we're going to lie. We're going to twist it. So why bother? And then I went around the room and I said, have you ever been contacted by somebody conducting a legitimate poll? Well, no. I said, well, that's the trick. Nobody has. So all we got to do is claim 1,400 people got surveyed. Who's going to know?
Right.
So for a bunch of the time, a lot of the polling that went on, there was never even a phone call made. But we learned that if you really play it smart, if you'll let Bill Clinton and Hillary get behind, keep them down, keep them behind, up until about 2 weeks, maybe 3 or 4 weeks at best, from the election. And then through your polling, you show them coming up, coming up, coming up. And then right before the election, boom, they cross over the finish line. Now remember, this is before the election's even taken place.
Right.
They come in from being second to now they're the winner. And then
it's like an underdog story.
You'll be amazed at the number of people that will go in and vote for them because they don't want to waste their vote.
So it's interesting, Larry. I mean, you're describing a psychological technique where, I mean, of course, you just come out and say whatever you want, and there's a huge percentage of people who will just believe that. You could say any kind of falsehood at all, and if it goes out, like I've spoken quite a bit about how Hillary Clinton, when she had her famous alt-right speech where she called out Alex Jones, she also in that speech spoke about her feelings that President Trump was a racist because Trump said that Rafael Cruz was hanging out with Lee Harvey Oswald, and that made him a racist. But it was actually a factual statement by Trump. However, Hillary puts out that message, Trump is a racist, and she repeats it with no evidence, and people believe that.
Right. But when you've got a willing media
right.
that doesn't cross-check or cross-reference anything, you can pull these kind of stunts, and that's what they've got. And you're seeing it in full view now. See, for 30 years, when I would try to tell people this, people would laugh at me, call me crazy. Well, they don't do that now. Because you know what? You see the media being complicit now. Just think about it. If you're not aware of the media being complicit actively, purposely, well, you're sitting there thinking, well, if they were lying about the polling stuff, the media would be all over it, right?
You would think, but they're not.
But they're not.
Well, it's of course it's a key component of their strategy, Larry, and we've heard from many guests how things like the Washington Post are obviously manipulated in the favor of, obviously who? I mean, the Washington Post is owned by Jeff Bezos. The Amazon.com used to have a $600 million a year contract with the CIA. And of course, John Podesta writes for the Washington Post. Bob Woodward writes for the Washington Post. Woodward's got a book coming out about President Trump. I want to redirect you for a second to Mr. Kavanaugh, Larry. So there is an article in the Washington Post right here, which is talking about hours before the Kavanaugh nomination hearings, Bush lawyer releases 42,000 pages of documents to the Judiciary Committee. And basically, this is seemingly a political chess move to bolster Chuck Schumer's calls to delay this hearing because they don't want anything at all to work in Trump's favor, certainly not prior to the midterm elections. Right?
That's right. This whole exercise with Kavanaugh is exactly what you just said. It's an exercise to do any and everything they can to delay that confirmation past that midterm.
Right.
They cannot allow Trump to get another victory.
Yep. But of course, Chuck Grassley's staff responded and said that they're able to do it. And then they tweeted a few hours later saying the majority of the staff has completed the review of all of the documents. I mean, frankly, 42,000, it's interesting. It's actually 42,390 pages. So I wonder, that's from William Burke.
Let's measure this, all right? Let's measure this. I do not doubt that there's probably a little dirty trick there.
Yeah.
Which side, I don't know, but there's probably a dirty little trick. But now let's compare that to 30-something thousand emails Hillary is still hiding.
Right.
You'll notice they don't bring that up in the hearing.
Well, I mean,
every time somebody brings up that 42,000, I would slam it right in their face. Well, we'll give it up when Hillary gives up her 30-something thousand from her server.
Right. Well, of course, the focus of this article is how William Burke, who's a lawyer representing Bush, I'm not sure what he's representing Bush in, but perhaps in the past he was a lawyer for Bush. And it's like this guy comes up with these 42,390 pages. I mean, it seems a bit like a filibuster technique to just overload people with documents. I mean, this is common practice for lawyers to just submit a suit of some kind and have a complaint and have an amended complaint, and they try to get you to waste a lot of time answering these documents. This is lawfare on a national scale. You know, they're pulling out every stop. I think most people are tired of this kind of, shenanigans. They don't want people sitting around in Washington thinking how they can stack the deck against their political opponents, so much as they want people thinking, how can we really utilize our clever legal minds to improve the lives of American people and improve the efficiency of the government? This is obviously the opposite of that, and I think Chuck Schumer is certainly guilty of being the poster child for doing the opposite of what's good.
That's right, and I go back to the beginning. It's this kind of development that plants that seed of doubt to many Americans.
Right.
That, you know what, maybe our form of government is broken.
Right.
Maybe we have reached a point to where the lawyers have so gotten in control of it now that we can never replace it, that we can never repair it. Now, my answer is this. There's nothing wrong with our Constitution. There's nothing wrong with our form of government. It has served us well and will continue to do so. It's the people we have there that have broken the trust, not our form of government.
Right. Absolutely. Now, Larry, I have another regular guest who shares your first name, Larry Klayman, of course, who's the founder of Judicial Watch and now Freedom Watch. And I was with Larry a couple months ago in Washington, D.C., when he had a successful outcome in his FOIA lawsuit where Judge Emmett, I forget his last name, Ellis, I forget the judge's last name, but he ruled in favor of Larry, saying that Mr. Mueller's special counsel team would have to turn over its communications with the press. It's Larry's position that Robert Mueller has been illegally leaking grand jury information to the press, and this FOIA lawsuit is intended to turn those documents over to Freedom Watch, and people can learn more about it on freedomwatchusa.org. But I've got an email into Larry trying to determine if he's received those documents yet, because those are going to be very interesting for us to learn. If Larry's lawsuit is successful, he feels that this may be an important artillery piece in the war against the fiction that is Robert Mueller's ill-conceived prosecution against President Trump.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I salute Larry for this effort. I promise you.
Yeah.
But I don't think any reasoned individual, any reasoned individual can look earnestly at Robert Mueller and his investigation and even pretend to believe that it is on the up and up in accordance with its purview as it was laid out in the beginning.
Right.
There's nothing about what Mueller's doing today that resembles in any way his charter in the beginning.
Right.
Agreed, or am I wrong?
No, I agree. I think it's quite clear that Robert Mueller is just a person that people are getting behind because they hate Donald Trump and they feel like he's going. I mean, I was having a conversation with a friend of a friend the other day who I don't agree with at all, who was, very enthusiastic about Robert Mueller. And in fact, the outcomes in both the Paul Manafort and Michael Cohen cases led this person to believe that this was somehow an indicator that Donald Trump had broken the law and that things were coming to an end. But of course, we have spoken on this show, and you and I have spoken about how the legal jeopardy that was imposed on both of those two men seemed specifically intended to, force them into plea arrangements and get them to say things or do things. I mean, again, it just feels like another move in this political game where it's not actually justice. What do you think about that?
Well, a friend of mine said it best when she said that they have literally weaponized the legal system.
Yes.
Against us. Now,
that's scary.
I have said, I have, since the day you and I first did our first program.
Mm-hmm.
I said Robert Mueller was coming in and he was bringing a hand-picked team with him of people that specialize in their different perspective areas in setting up and framing defendants.
Right.
And that's exactly what they're doing.
Right.
That's exactly what they're doing.
Right.
And
now you've got experience in court.
You can look at Manafort and show the connection of Manafort going back to the original charter of Mueller relative to Trump and collusion and the Russians, etc. It don't fit, but that doesn't seem to stop them. Cohen, that don't fit, but that don't seem to stop them. Then they've got the problem with Flynn. See, Flynn is their problem. Mueller knows it. You see, Mueller's got a problem with Flynn. They were able, with Cohen, Jason, to keep his prosecution relative under New York statutes.
Mm-hmm.
Which limits what the president can do with his power to, oh goodness, to
Pardon him?
pardon, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Limits his power. But now, Flynn is in federal purview. So he can be pardoned for any and everything that's brought against him.
Hmm.
And Mueller knows it. So what Mueller's having to do is he's having to hold his guns, Jason, hold on as long as he can to his guns with Flynn.
Right.
Try to get Flynn to snap or break somehow by going and doing what? Going after his kids.
Right. And that's a really low blow. I mean, we see them doing that with the president as well. This whole thing with Donald Trump Jr. and the meeting at Trump Tower. We don't hear the mainstream media talking about Natalia Veselnitskaya meeting with Glenn Simpson of Fusion GPS. And we haven't heard, outside of the sphere of YouTube news, we haven't heard much about Bruce Orr working for the Department of Justice, Nellie Orr working for Fusion GPS. I mean, it's just so obvious to, I'm sure, you and myself and the people watching some of these things. We really want to help other people understand. I mean, it's not even a matter of being pro-Trump and wanting to share this message for that reason. I think every person should be very concerned that we've got high-level people working at the Department of Justice whose spouses work for these opposition research firms that are actively involved in trying to thwart the candidacy of anyone who would run for the President of the United States.
And what people don't realize, in many of these positions that the spouses hold, it's literally a crime to do it, to hold a job, work for the government, and then to take money in from an outside organization. In many cases, that's subject to prison.
Right. But they control the Department of Justice, so yeah, they don't talk about it. Now, Larry, I just want to point people to your website for a moment, nicholslive.com. You've got on there, you've got the scripts that people can use to contact their representatives, and you've also got the very helpful resource of having compiled all the phone numbers of a number of different members of the House Judiciary Committee, etc. I think this alone is a valuable resource for people to go to this one central location at nicholslive.com and look over the information that you and your team have assembled, the names of the representatives that people can speak to and call, the House Intelligence Committee, and ask these guys what are and ladies what they're doing and why things are happening this way. So thank you for putting that together, Larry.
Well, you bet. Now, that's the team did that, not me. But I will say this, folks, one of the lines that they're going to give y'all when you call these numbers, they're going to say, for example, Mr. Nichols, what state are you in? I say Arkansas, and they say, well, the congressman's from Pennsylvania, and you're not in our district. No, When these people are on these oversight committees, they represent the whole nation. Don't fall for that. Don't fall for that. You're not calling about a farm bill that affects only Ohio. We're talking about something that affects our entire nation. These oversight committees, the minute they're on these committees, they work for all of us. Do not let them pull that trick on you. Above all else, the reason that's there, Jason, folks, we're going to have to engage. We've got to. We have sat back for years. All of us, me included, we've sat back and said, well, I voted and elected Joe Schmo to be my representative or to be my senator. So I've done my part. And walk away.
Right.
It's not enough. It's not enough. You see what that's gotten us?
Yeah.
Nothing. And it's got a son, which just ain't good.
No.
You must engage.
Yeah.
You must come to Jason's site, the site where you get actual information, not fluff. And that's what I object to, Jason, about so much of this alternative media stuff. It's like there's a whole world out there of alternative media sources, but everybody's scrambling, trying to grow an audience instead of fighting the fight. Fight.
Well, the other danger that we've got, Larry, the other danger that we've got is that I think there are a lot of people who pose as news sites and reporters and people who are trying to get to the truth, but in actual fact, they're the opposite of that, and they are being hired or otherwise persuaded to work against people that would want to bring out the truth. I mean, we've spoken about this National Defense Authorization Act of, I think, 2014 that legalized propaganda. They made it legal for government agencies to use propaganda against U.S. citizens. And, you know, Ole Damagard, I don't know if you're familiar with Ole, but we've been doing a regular show on patreon.com called Light on Conspiracies with Ole Damagard. And Ole has pointed out that there are things like Crowds on Demand, which is a company that allows you to hire mobs and stage, you know, simulated events like protests or, you know, whatever you might need them for. And this is essentially a propaganda staging company. They even talk about, you know, your home for protests, rallies, advocacy, audiences, PR stunts, and political events. Services are available nationwide. So these guys are staging protests, staging rallies.
Yeah, somebody a few months ago contacted me because we were trying to get people to call into Alabama for Judge Roy Moore or whatever it was. And this company called, and for like $1,000, they could get, you know, 100,000 calls, you know, to a congressman. You know, I'm sitting there going, you got to be kidding me. But it's there. I mean, I guess you can buy anything.
Right. Right.
But what scares me, Jason, is the number of people that are out there claiming that their alternative news source is the center, and they've got inside contacts. They've got contacts on the inside that tell them the real story.
Right.
And they're not. They don't.
That's right.
And you don't know if they're propaganda for the bad guys or for the Russians or whomever. We don't know.
The Clintons?
Yeah.
The Obamas?
You know, the Clintons are specialists. They've been doing propaganda since Bill Clinton was governor in Arkansas, folks. That's how long ago it's been going on.
Well, talk to us about a specific propaganda campaign. Larry, sorry to interrupt, but talk to us about a specific propaganda campaign that went on while you were working with the Clintons, and give us some insight into how that sort of thing would have worked.
Oh, good God. One specifically. Well, one would have been Tyson Foods. Tyson Foods wanted to buy, now this was actually after I left, but I knew about it. Tyson Foods wanted to buy Alaskan Fisheries.
Right.
Alaskan Fisheries had invented this boat, I'm making these terms up, but a boat that could catch the fish, process the fish, and do it all out at sea. Well, that was a going Jesse at the time. So what did they do? The Clintons put the heat on all the members of the Senate and Congress in the Oversight Committee, and had Brown, who was the
Ron Brown, Commerce Secretary,
Secretary of Commerce. They put all kinds of pressure on him and his office, and had them literally shut down the deal with Alaskan Fisheries being able to catch and process the fish out to sea. They shut it down. Then Tyson turned around once that was done, and they bought the company for like 10 cents on a dollar or less. And it was ridiculous how low they bought it for. And then right after they bought it, guess what? Ron Brown reversed his ruling and made it legal for them to process it.
Well, but that seems more like a manipulation of the office of the Secretary of Commerce. What would you say specifically was, or maybe I'm putting you on the spot. While we talk, think back if you can come up with any recollections of a specific propaganda campaign. I mean, what you were telling us about the polls definitely seems more
well, I mean,
along
a propaganda
the lines.
campaign, another one would have been the tainted blood that we sold to Canada from our prisons.
Right.
I mean, we did a massive marketing campaign, what appeared to be a massive marketing campaign, but it was actually prisoners in prison that we had them calling officials in Canada, telling them they needed to get the blood from Arkansas because we did it all over the world. And it was actually prisoners in prison making the phone calls.
Wow.
And then, of course, the rest of the story was when Canada finally started buying the blood, it turns out the blood was coming from the prisoners and the blood was tainted. A lot of the blood had AIDS and HIV.
That's terrible. Really terrible.
And they knew it. And they knew it and kept doing it.
Why would they do that?
Money. Money. Big money. That was big money. Big money.
But giving people HIV earn them money somehow?
Well, I mean, all the money they made selling blood to Canada, they didn't care if the blood was tainted. They didn't care. They never found out it was tainted from Arkansas. Canada found out when bunches of people started coming down with AIDS.
Right. Right. I want to redirect you for a second, Larry, to this tweet that Donald Trump put out about Jeff Sessions. He basically, well, Bob Woodward is saying that Trump said that Sessions was retarded and, you know, all this negative stuff. I'm looking for the tweet from the other day where he's basically bashing Sessions on Twitter. People are speculating that this is some sort of a sting operation, that Trump is trying to misdirect people into thinking he's unhappy with Jeff Sessions. Do you have any insight as to what's going on with General Sessions and President Trump?
Here's what I'm allowed to tell. Allowed to tell.
Right.
If President Trump was indeed disappointed to the extreme in Jeff Sessions, there's no doubt, or should be no doubt in anyone's mind, that Donald Trump would fire his butt in a heartbeat.
We don't think that he's stopping short of doing that because it would look bad politically to fire Sessions right now?
In the beginning, I know this. In the beginning, Trump and Sessions had a working relationship, almost a good guy, bad guy routine. They did not want, Sessions being an old vintage politician, he did not want to be cast in a role that made it look like he was Trump's lackey. All right? He did not want to be cast in that role. So they came up with a plan which would be almost adversarial so that it would be obvious that Sessions and Trump were not working in concert. They're not near as far apart as people would believe. And Sessions is not near as far away from prosecutions, let's say, as people might think. But it still remains, they've got to find a clean court to get in.
But it seems that Attorney General Sessions has announced indictments against two of these Republican congressmen who were supporting Trump, and he's doing it at a time that's so close to the midterm. I think Trump even said, here it says, two long-running Obama-era investigations of two very popular Republican congressmen were brought to well-publicized charge just ahead of the midterms by Jeff Sessions' Justice Department. Two easy wins now in doubt.
Let me tell you something, Jason. Let me tell you all something. Jeff Sessions took that job under one condition and one condition only. And that was that he would be allowed to bring the Department of Justice back under the Constitution, no matter where it fell, no matter who it hurt. And to my knowledge, he has done just that and is doing that. Does that mean some Republicans are going to get tangled up in it? Yes, it does. But guess what? If they're guilty of what they're being charged with, they have no right to expect any treatment other than what they're getting.
Right.
That's the problem we have. There's too many people right now that are guilty of things, but nothing's happening to them.
Right. So this was Republican Duncan Hunter of California and Chris Collins of New York. And apparently Collins was charged with 13 counts of securities fraud, and Hunter was indicted for using campaign funds for personal use. I mean, frankly, it's surprising to me that the Justice Department would be indicting anyone on charges like this, given how much evidence Charles Ortel has presented of the Clintons doing these types of things, and yet nothing has happened.
Well, I rest my case. That's what I've been saying all along. Unless something is done to Hillary Clinton, there's one thing that we all will know. Unless something's done to Hillary, unless she's prosecuted somehow, then we can all fully accept and understand that there are two standards of law in America, one for us and one for them.
Yeah. I mean, that seems...
You can't make it up, you can't dodge it, you can't get around that any other way, I don't believe. Can you?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many strange things going on. It's hard to believe. Another thing I wanted to bring to your attention, Larry, I've been looking at True Pundit, obviously, in preparation for tonight's 8 p.m. show with Michael Moore. It's going to be here on YouTube, and then we're going to be launching our new show called More Pain, and that's going to be available to our Patreon subscribers who support the show at patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. And of course, people who support True Pundit on Patreon will be able to see it there as well. But True Pundit is telling us that Rahm Emanuel has announced that he is not going to seek re-election as mayor in Chicago. Of course, Rahm Emanuel is closely connected to Barack Obama, and his brother runs, is it CAAA or WME? Very powerful, I think it might be WME, there in Hollywood. So these guys are controlling a lot of power centers around the country. What do you think about Rahm Emanuel deciding not to seek re-election?
Well, he is, I can tell you, in the hot seat for prosecution, big time.
Why do you say that?
I can only tell you he's in the hot seat for prosecution.
Got it.
You're going to have to stick with me on that. He's in trouble deep. He's been carrying a bunch of the ball for the Clintons, and as the Clintons have been known to do time and time again, when they needed him, they used him. When they don't, they dump him.
Right.
And he has been dumped by the Clintons, and he knows it. And so he's making his bed. He's trying to make him a deal. And I don't think he's going to get it. Could get it, but I don't think he will.
And I think most people would consider Rahm Emanuel more associated with Barack Obama. Obviously very curious that he became the mayor of Chicago, where so many Barack Obama-style things are happening. You know, we've heard that Barack Obama is having some difficulty with his foundation and the presidential library that he proposes to build there in Chicago. I wonder if, you know, I've speculated quite frequently with Charles that the Clintons have basically put together this accelerated dynasty model where, you know, George H.W. Bush, to have a dynasty, he was waiting for his sons to sort of ascend to the presidency. But what the Clintons have done that's unprecedented in American history, we had Bill as president. They established, of course, the Clinton Foundation there in Arkansas and the Bill Clinton Presidential Library, which then went on to expand and do all kinds of things that they've never been legally authorized to do, and created this opportunity for the Clintons to essentially launder billions of dollars through the Clinton Foundation, through various international globalist organizations and various governments. And now it seems that the Obamas are sort of following that model where we've had Barack as president. They now create this gigantic foundation that people can funnel money to. And of course, Michelle remains an extremely viable candidate in the view of many people. I mean, certainly she's a brand name, and if they were to run her against Donald Trump, it's hard to imagine someone who could be more opposite to Donald Trump than a younger black woman versus an older white man, Democrat Obama versus Trump.
Well, first off, don't make a mistake. Don't make a mistake in your assumption that Rahm Emanuel would be closer tied to Obama than the Clintons. The Clintons and Emanuel go back years and years and years and years.
Really?
College days. Yeah.
Huh.
Number one, so don't make that mistake. Number two, Obama's going to learn that the Clinton Foundation and this global system of elitists that they have put together, that's not something you throw together overnight. I don't care if you're a past president or not. It takes time, it takes contacts, and he doesn't have them. He doesn't have them. He will never build the system that the Clintons have built. Never will. Now, what the Democrats are betting on, they're betting that they are so tarnishing Donald Trump right now that this midterm election, if it does what they're hoping it to do,
right,
come 2020, they believe they ought to be able to run Howdy Doody and beat Trump.
Are you talking about James Comey?
Well, I mean, they're just saying that if they complete their mission of destroying Trump, then the whole ordeal of who's going to be president in the 2020 election will be on the Democratic Party side. The Republicans will not have a chance with Trump if they get their way. This is what Trump's fighting so hard. Now you know why Trump's going out making 40, 50 of these campaign-type speeches all around the country in preparation for this midterm election.
Right.
He knows what I know. He knows better than what I know.
Well, that's just
this is it for him.
Yeah, they're really just throwing everything that they can at Trump to try. It so flies in the face of the interests of every single person in America to be just deliberately trying to thwart the presidency rather than coming together and saying, okay, hey, there's things we disagree on, but let's work with this president. I mean, Larry, we've never seen this level of universal opposition to a sitting president, have we?
Nope. Well, maybe with Bill. You know, I've thought about this quite a lot, Jason. I really have. I may be to blame for a lot of this.
How so?
When I came out against Bill Clinton, when he was president, when he was running for president the first time, and I brought out Jennifer Flowers, Paula Jones, et cetera, I was all the time on the radio. Everywhere I went, people were saying, "My God, can't believe you're talking about a president the way you are about Bill Clinton. You know, respect the office is nothing else. You don't have to respect him." And we created this polarization.
Mm-hmm.
Bill Clinton is the creation of polarization. I mean, people became either loved him or hated him.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'm just wondering if possibly what's going on with Trump isn't a bit of Montezuma's revenge for that. Maybe it's payback time. Payback time for the Democrats, to where they get their turn. I don't know. I hope it's not. I wish it would be that, I guess is what I should say, I suppose. But it's deep. What we've got now, Jason, is deep. And what's scarier still, and maybe you can help me, I don't know where this ends. Do you?
Right. Well, I certainly don't. I mean, I'm hopeful that the president will overcome these malicious attacks and be able to get down to business. I mean, there's a lot of things going on in the world that a president needs to deal with, and it just seems like all of this is designed to prevent him from doing that, to prevent him from having a productive and successful presidency.
Right.
It's almost like they're upset that the GDP has gone up 4.2% and that unemployment is lowered. And I haven't heard Chuck Schumer say anything about how we can come together and try to work in a bipartisan way. He's just got nothing but negativity and nonsense to say, and it's quite disconcerting, I have to say. The articles that are coming up right now about the Kavanaugh hearings are saying that it's just arguing and chaos, and the Democrats already calling for an adjournment of the hearings. I mean, as you said, they just want to waste time and obstruct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no reason, to be honest. There's no reason as it stands now for the hearing to even continue. Nothing's going to be done in it. Nothing constructive is going to happen in that hearing now.
I just feel like nothing ever happens in these hearings. I mean, we saw this hearing with Peter Strzok, and I felt that Louis Gohmert gave some very interesting comments, but it was mostly Democrats fluffing this guy's ego, and everything that he's done quite obviously seems to be well outside the range of what FBI agents are expected to do and how they're expected to act. And I mean, I don't know, we are literally looking at obfuscation in real time. I think more than ever, perhaps this is just my perception, but it seems like people are more engaged. Things like the internet and social media and what we're doing here on Crowdsource the Truth seem to be bringing more people into the conversation and giving us more opportunities and more options to look at and analyze these things. And this is what I really value about our conversations together, Larry. Your experience, your insight, the things that happened and how the Clintons operate and how it continues to be happening today. It's really astounding.
Yeah, it's, even for me, Jason, I can't sleep if I allow myself to get lost in that moment of saying, where does this end? Yeah. I mean, look, we're one gunshot away from this country blowing wide open. I don't know who the gunshot is. Is it a liberal shooting a conservative shooting a liberal? Is it I don't even know. I can't tell you. I'm just telling you we're at a blow-up point.
Yeah, well, that seems quite clear.
Yeah, but I mean, saying you're at a blow-up point is one thing, but we got to do something to try to stop it. We can't This is not something where we can just obfuscate and just say, okay, that's what it is and that's the way it'll be, so what? You know, we'll just play it as it comes.
Right. Well,
It's too
certainly,
serious, it's too big.
right, definitely very big, even for people to contemplate. But certainly something that people can do is they can go to nicholslive.com, and Larry and his team have put a number of links there. You can contact Larry, you can support him through donations, and of course you can access these scripts that are going to give you an outline of what you can say, not only to representatives from your state, but to members of Congress who sit on these extremely important committees that, as Larry said, are operating in the interests of everyone. So even if the representatives listed on Larry's extensive phone list aren't the representatives from your state, as he's advised, you can call them and say that the outcomes of the findings from the House Intelligence Committee and the House Judiciary Committee certainly affect all of us, and as citizens of the United States, you have a right to speak to these representatives and to tell them how you feel and how you want to be represented. I also want everyone to tune in later tonight, 8 p.m. here on YouTube, on Periscope, on Facebook, on VK.com, on Gab.ai. I'll be joined by Michael Thomas Payne Moore of True Pundit, and then at 8:30 tonight will be our first episode of More Pain with Michael Moore, and of course he's been known as Thomas Paine in the past of True Pundit. We're going to be talking about all of this and more. Michael, of course, has a book coming out soon that he tells me is going to change the world. I think people are eagerly anticipating that. People should go to truepundit.com and support the work that they're doing there. Larry, before we wrap it up for today...
Before we go, Jason, I've
Yes.
got to say this. And folks, this is not put together, planned, orchestrated. But Jason and what he's trying to do is so important. I'm here. I'm here because he allows me to come. He affords me the opportunity to be here with y'all. We need your support. He needs it. I don't. It's not for me. It's for his program. It's for his group. We got to have it. You've got to help. You've got to dig in. Everybody, all of you sitting out there today, you got to dig in. You got to help. You got to dig deep. It's as much your country as it is Jason's. It's as much your country as it is mine. Please help. Jason, how can they help directly?
Well, thank you, Larry. The best way for people to help is by joining patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. And again, the thing that I'm trying to do is not get onto YouTube to make money. I'm trying to create a new business model for finding and reporting news. And when it's sponsored by a singular or a small number of very wealthy sponsors, as traditional news is. We have advertisers on there.
Right.
We hear other people tell you, oh, this show is brought to you by this gold company or this cryptocurrency or whatever it might be. I don't want to do that, because then that sponsoring entity has so much financial influence over what I can or cannot report on that is really counterproductive to the interests of the people that want this information. By using this business model where I'm not relying on selling some product or whatever, the product is this information, the product is the videos that are being produced. So if people value that, and if they want the news to be free of the financial influence of a single large sponsor, it's important that for even $1 a month, people get onto patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. And as a thank you to the generous sponsors that are doing that, I've created a number of programs that are exclusive to Patreon. We still continue to bring as much information as possible to, I'm making air quotes when I say free platforms, Larry, because of course it's not free when you're watching videos on YouTube. You are basically exchanging your freedom of choice handing that over to Google, handing that over to Twitter, to Periscope, to Facebook. For just $1 a month, you can take that back, and you don't need YouTube to tell you who you can or cannot watch. We don't want troll and sock puppet accounts to influence people's opinions in the same way that Larry was describing these political polls are influencing people. Any old person can come out with an article that says 14,000 people were polled and said this. Why would someone listen to an anonymous commenter on Twitter or an anonymous commenter on YouTube? I want people to form their own opinions about me, their own opinions about Larry. You know, Larry, any guest I bring on here, and you're included unfortunately in this, people comment and people contact me and say, don't have this or that person on your show for whatever reason. But I don't do that.
I can imagine.
I want people to listen to what you have to say and formulate their own opinions, not based on what some commenter has to say. And I mean, you've told us, you've done things in the past that you regret. And, you know, again, I think that there's always something for us to learn from someone. You've got experience that is incredibly unique, very intriguing, and I know that the overwhelming majority of people who are tuning in every Tuesday at 3 to listen to our phone calls are very interested in what you have to say. They appreciate your insights. They appreciate you coming forward. And I know I'm very pleased to hear you sounding much better today than you have in the recent past. And I want to wish you the best of health.
Well, thank you. And folks, I've been around a long time, and I have seen what Jason talked about. When you start getting sponsors that come in with the big money, you better hold on to your britches, because when they come in and they sponsor these programs, they think they own them.
Right.
And when you get hooked on the money, it's very hard to tell them no. So Jason's model, his business plan, is the one that has to be successful, because the others have been tried and tried and tried, and it always ends up failing.
Right. And frankly, Larry, it's the same way that these political campaigns are financed. You know, Bernie Sanders turned away from that and said he was, you know, I mean, Bernie, we've learned a lot of things about that are sort of also disappointing. But this notion of micro-sponsorship, it makes a lot more sense. It's a lot more compatible with a democratic republic than the notion of, you know, one centralized sponsorship source. So thank you for those.
And do us all a favor, folks. Invite liberals to come here, especially on Tuesday.
Yeah.
Invite liberal friends to come. We are all in it together. A liberal, a conservative, an independent, we're all in it together. If we're fighting for the Constitution, we're in it together.
That's true. And you raise a great point, Larry. If people don't want to sponsor the show, they can share these videos. There are still going to be tons of videos available on platforms that can be shared openly. And it is a great way for people to participate. So I want to thank my guest, Larry Nichols, for joining me once again. Larry, I look forward to our conversation next week. Try to stay out of the heat. I'm sure these dog days, the last few days of summer here in Arkansas, have got to be really hot.
Yeah, they're tough.
All right.
Well, we look forward to being here next Tuesday, bud.
Absolutely, Larry. Thanks for all of your insights, and thanks for joining me today. I'll see everyone tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern, right here with Michael Moore, Thomas Paine of True Pundit.